She knocked on my door at 12:43 in the morning, which I know because I had been awake and looking at the ceiling, and was aware of the time in the specific way you are, when sleep is not coming, and you have stopped pretending it will. I heard her door first, the soft click of it, the pause, then the 3 knocks she always did, the same 3 every time she knocked on my door for anything, and I recognized the pattern the way you recognize the handwriting of someone you've read enough letters from. "Come in," I said. She opened the door but stayed in the frame. The hallway light was behind her. She was in the oversized sweatshirt she wore when she couldn't sleep, which I knew because I had learned her sleep deprivation wardrobe the way you learn these things when you live close enough to someone, not by studying, but by being there. "I can't sleep," she said. "Okay," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "It's been 3 nights." "I know," I said. "I heard you." Another moment. She was looking at the floor of my room, not at me, in the way she looked at things when she was deciding whether to say the thing she'd already decided to say. "I can't sleep unless you're next to me," she said. I don't know when that started, but that's where we are. I did not say anything for a long moment. That was the most honest thing Vera Lund had ever said to me, and she was one of the most honest people I knew, which meant it had cost her something considerable to say. I moved over. "My name is Seth Calloway." I was 30. A cartographer for a geographic survey firm, which meant I spent my working life making maps. Not the digital kind, though I did those too, but the older discipline underneath them, the practice of translating what exists in the physical world into something someone else can navigate by. A map is an argument about what matters. You decide what to include, what to leave out, what to name. I had always understood this work as a kind of honesty. The map that shows you what's actually there, rather than what you hope to find, is the only one that gets you anywhere. I had been making the wrong map of my own situation for about 11 months. I had moved into the apartment on Decker Street after a job transfer brought me to Portland from a position in Denver I'd liked but not loved. The city was new, the apartment was fine, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor with windows that looked out over a block of older row houses and a kitchen that got afternoon light in a way that made it feel like a room someone had actually thought about, which I appreciated in a specific way that probably said something about my priorities. The 2nd bedroom was already occupied by Vera, who was there when I came to look at the place and who had assessed me in about 45 seconds with the particular efficiency of someone who had interviewed roommates before and had developed a reliable method. She was a physical therapist at a rehabilitation clinic, which I mention not because jobs are people, but because the job was, in her case, a fair description of the person. She worked with people who had sustained injuries that required patience and sustained effort to recover from. Not the quick fixes, but the long ones. The ones where progress was measured in increments too small for most people to celebrate. She was good at it. She was the kind of good at something that you notice not in the moments of obvious skill but in the small things. The way she listened when her patients described their pain, the specific words she chose when she gave instructions, the fact that she remembered, 3 sessions out, what had made the difference and built on it deliberately. She was 31, she had brown eyes and dark blonde hair, she usually kept in a loose braid, and an expression that was direct without being aggressive. The kind that told you she saw clearly and intended to continue doing so whether or not you found it comfortable. The small scar above her left eyebrow was from a mountain bike incident she described, when I eventually asked, as entirely her own fault and entirely worth it. She said, after the 45 seconds, "You seem fine, you can have the room." I had not expected to like her as much as I did. The first few weeks established what I would later understand was a pattern with Vera. She operated at a high baseline of competence and expected you to meet her there without requiring instruction. She had put a chore chart on the fridge not because she was rigid but because she said ambiguity about domestic logistics was the fastest way to resent a person you otherwise had no problem with, and she liked to solve problems before they became ones. I had never once in 11 months found this unreasonable. She was right. The chart worked. We had not once had an argument about dishes. She also had a very specific talent for making the apartment feel inhabited. Not cluttered, she was precise about her own space, but alive. There were plants in the kitchen window that she kept without making a production of it. A rotating set of library books on the coffee table. The smell of coffee in the morning earlier than mine because she ran before 7 when she could. She had opinions, clearly held and easily shared, about the things that mattered to her, the parks in the city, and which ones were designed with genuine consideration for how people moved through them, the precise moral difference between being blunt and being unkind. The question of whether it was acceptable to like a film you knew was technically bad, which she argued was entirely acceptable, and which I agreed with, and which had led to us watching 3 films on this precise principle on separate Friday nights that I had come to think of with more affection than I'd meant to. I had been paying close attention to that for a long time without naming it. I had spent most of my 20s being reliable in ways that were valued and present in ways that were taken for granted, and the relationship that ended 6 months before the move had confirmed what I had been quietly circling, that I had become the person in the room everyone counted on and no one particularly fought for. My last girlfriend had said, at the end, that I was the most dependable person she'd ever been with. She'd said it gently, she'd meant it as a compliment, and it had landed as the truth in a way she hadn't intended. The truth being that dependable had arrived without its better half, without the thing that made dependable feel chosen rather than merely useful. She wasn't cruel, she was accurate. I had been too honest with myself not to hear what the word meant when it arrived without company. I wasn't bitter, I was recalibrating. Vera Lund, in the 11 months that followed, had not treated me as dependable in that way. Not because she didn't depend on me, she did, and I on her. The mutual low-level dependency of 2 people who shared a kitchen and a Thursday routine of ordering Thai food and watching whatever the other one recommended, and then arguing about it in the specific comfortable way of people who had learned each other's standards. She treated me as someone she had made a considered decision about. Like the room, she'd assessed the situation, found it workable, and committed without hedging. I had never once felt, in that apartment, like an afterthought. I had been paying close attention to that for a long time without naming it. The first night she knocked had been 11 weeks earlier. She had come down a bad cold that left her sleeping poorly, and she had appeared in my doorway at 2 in the morning with the particular dignity of someone who hates asking for anything and is doing it anyway, and asked if I'd come sit with her in the living room for a while because she'd been alone in her room for 4 days and the walls were getting personal. I'd made tea. We'd watched a nature documentary she'd seen twice already and which she claimed was boring enough to be sedating, which was its own kind of logic. She'd fallen asleep on the couch within 20 minutes. I'd put a blanket over her and gone back to bed. The second night had been 6 weeks later. No illness this time. She'd had a patient that week. She didn't give me details, confidentiality, but I knew from the way she moved through the apartment that someone had not improved the way she'd needed them to. She'd knocked at 11 and said she was sorry and could we just watch something. And we had, and she'd fallen asleep again, this time with her feet across my lap, and I had watched the rest of the episode and then very carefully not moved until my alarm went off at 6:15. The third night was 3 weeks after that. Nothing had gone wrong. She had not been sick, no difficult patient, no particular visible reason. She had knocked at 11:30 and said simply, "I can't settle," which was a phrase I had not heard her use before, and which I understood to mean something specific, and not entirely about sleep. We'd sat on the couch. She'd been asleep by midnight. I had filed all 3 of these under "she's going through something, be present, don't complicate it." That filing system had worked adequately until the 4th week of the pattern, which was when I understood that the system was the thing that had become complicated, and not the situation itself. The pattern was this: she didn't sleep alone the way she slept next to me. I knew this not because she told me, but because I could hear it. The difference between the pacing and the silence, the 2 a.m. footsteps that meant she was still awake, versus the particular quiet that meant she'd finally gone under. I had spent the previous 3 weeks listening for that quiet and noting when it arrived and what had preceded it. This is the kind of thing a cartographer does. You observe, you record, you look for the pattern in the data before you name what the data is telling you. The data was telling me something I had been slow to name. She slept when she was near me. She did not sleep, reliably, when she was not. This was either a simple fact about comfort and proximity and the particular way some people settle in the presence of someone they trusted, or it was something more specific, and I had been very careful for 3 weeks to treat it as the first option, because the second option required me to examine what I had been labeling the last 11 months, and I was not entirely prepared for what that examination would find. I was a cartographer. I knew what it meant to mislabel terrain. I also knew what it meant to keep using the wrong label because the right one committed you to something. There had been a moment, 6 weeks before the 12:43 knock, that I should mention because it belongs in the record. We had been on the couch one of the nights she couldn't sleep, the nature documentary, her feet across my lap, the usual arrangement, and she had said, half asleep, her voice already going soft at the edges, "I think I've stopped minding the Tuesday nights alone." I'd looked at her. She'd had her eyes closed. "Why?" I said. "Because there are enough of the other nights now," she said. Just that. Then she was asleep. I had sat with that sentence for 6 weeks. Because there are enough of the other nights now. I had turned it over the way you turn over a topographic feature you haven't seen before, looking at it from multiple angles, figuring out whether you were reading the elevation correctly. I had decided, incorrectly as it turned out, that it was a statement about contentment and not about me specifically, that I had been hearing my own name in a sentence that wasn't about me. The 12:43 knock made it clear I had read the elevation wrong. The night she said it, standing in my doorway, the hallway light behind her, the sweatshirt, the 3 months of other knocks before it, she had said the true thing instead of the adjacent thing, and I had understood, in the second before I moved over, that she had been waiting until she was certain. Not certain about me, she had been certain about me for a while. I would find out later, months later, on a Sunday morning with coffee going and her feet in my lap on the couch, the same couch, that she had been certain about me since roughly month 4, and had spent the intervening 7 months waiting to be sure that what she was certain of was actually what she thought it was, and not something the proximity had manufactured. She was a physical therapist. She understood the difference between a response to the environment and a response to the person. She did not trust manufactured feelings. She trusted the ones that survived testing, the ones still present when you'd changed the conditions 3 or 4 times and they remained. She had tested it. It had survived. But I did not know any of this that night. What I knew, in the moment between the sentence and the moving over, was that she had said the true thing, at 12:43 in the morning, standing in my doorway in the sweatshirt she wore when she couldn't sleep, and that the true thing matched something I had been carrying for months without a name for it. I moved over. She came in. She lay down on top of the covers, her back to me, and within 11 minutes, I was counting, not because I'm strange, but because I'm a cartographer and I notice intervals, she was asleep. I was not. I lay there in the dark thinking about what she'd said. "I can't sleep unless you're next to me." She had framed it as a statement of where they were, which was the most Vera Lund way possible to say a thing that was about considerably more than sleep, and which was also, if you were paying attention, an invitation stated in the least presumptuous form she could find for it. She had not said, "I think I have feelings for you," or "something has changed," or any of the constructions I might have expected. She had said the literal, physical truth of the situation, and let it carry the weight of everything underneath it. She was giving me the information. What I did with it was mine to decide. I lay awake for a long time. Here is what I knew. Lying there in the dark with Vera asleep 2 feet away. I had been in this apartment for 11 months, and she was the first person in 3 years who made me feel like the room changed when I entered it. Not because of anything performed. Because she paid attention in the specific way that told you the attention was real. She remembered things you said 3 conversations ago. She asked follow-up questions instead of moving on. She pushed back when she disagreed, and did it without heat, and then let the disagreement go when it was resolved, instead of filing it somewhere to retrieve later. She was a person who was fully there when she was there, which I had learned was rarer than I'd understood when I was younger. I also knew that I had been very carefully not looking directly at any of this for months, which was its own kind of information. I didn't say anything that night. Not because I didn't know what I wanted to say, because I understood that the thing she had offered was precise, and had been considered for a long time, and it deserved more than the middle of the night and the dark, and a response that came from being caught off guard. She had waited until she was sure. I owed it to both of us to wait until I could be deliberate. She was gone when I woke up. Back to her own room. Her door was closed. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the row houses and thought about maps. A map is only as good as its honesty. The map that includes the things you wish weren't there, the swamp, the unstable ground, the river that floods, is the one that actually gets you through. The one that leaves those things off because they're inconvenient is the one that gets you killed. I had been making the convenient map for 11 months. The one that called the terrain something more manageable than what it was. I thought about that for a while. I thought about the night she'd appeared in my doorway with the cold, and the night after the patient she didn't talk about, and the third night with no reason given, just I can't settle. I thought about the Thursday Thai food and the documentaries and the way she read on the couch with her feet tucked under her and told me about her books in the specific way of someone who wanted to share the thing, not perform having read it. I thought about the conversation we'd had 4 months ago when I'd been having a bad week and hadn't said so, and she'd come home and looked at me once and said, "What happened with the certainty of someone who already knew the answer was yes and was just giving me space to say it?" The map was not complicated. I had made it complicated by mislabeling it. I stood at the window for 20 minutes. Then I rinsed my mug, walked down the hall, and stood outside her door for long enough that I was aware I was doing it, which meant I was aware of what it said about me that I needed the time. A map that gets you somewhere requires commitment at the point of decision. You can study the terrain indefinitely. At some point you have to pick the route and walk. I knocked on her door at 8:15. She opened it in the same sweatshirt. She looked at me with the direct expression that had not changed in 11 months, the one that saw clearly and intended to continue doing so. "You slept," I said. "I did," she said. "I didn't." Something moved through her expression, not guilt. She hadn't done anything wrong, something more careful than that. The particular quality of attention she gave things when she understood they mattered. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have." "Don't," I said. "That's not why I'm here." She was quiet. "I've been making the wrong map," I said. A pause. She knew what I did for a living. "Of what?" she said. "This. Us. I've been labeling it wrong, leaving things off that were there, because putting them on the map made them real, and real things can go wrong." I looked at her. "I'm done leaving them off." She held my gaze for a moment with the assessment I'd seen 100 times, the one that saw clearly and reported accurately. Something in it shifted. Not surprise. She wasn't surprised. Something more like relief, the specific kind that comes when you've been holding a thing steady for a long time and someone finally takes the other end. "I've known what it was for a while," she said. "I was waiting to be sure it would last." "And?" I said. "You moved over," she said, "without asking any questions. And you didn't say anything afterward, which meant you were being careful with it, which meant you were taking it seriously. A beat. That's the lasting kind. Something in me settled the way things settle when you've finally got the right coordinates, and the map matches the ground beneath your feet. "Can I take you to breakfast?" I said. "I've been awake since 6, thinking about pancakes," she said. "So yes, obviously." We went to a place 4 blocks away with a counter that ran the length of the window and coffee that came in mugs that were too big and better than they needed to be, and we sat next to each other instead of across, which neither of us commented on, and we talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing and the specific quality of the morning that exists after you've said the true thing and found that the world is still intact. She ordered pancakes, I ordered eggs. She ate 3 of my eggs without asking, which was not a new behavior. I ate 2 of her pancakes, same. We had been doing a version of this with Thai food on Thursdays for 11 months, and this was not different, and was entirely different, and we both knew it, and neither of us needed to say so. That was 14 months ago. The apartment on Decker Street is still ours. We rebalanced the furniture at some point, a gradual rearrangement that happened without a conversation, the way things settle into their right places when you stop trying to enforce a configuration that no longer fits. The second bedroom is her studio now. The lease renews in the spring, and I am not thinking about that because there is no version of next year that doesn't include this apartment and this person and the particular weight of 3 knocks on a door at 12:43 in the morning from someone who had finally decided to say the true thing. I still make maps. I am better at the other kind now. The one where you look at what is actually there and have the honesty to name it correctly, even when the name is larger than the one you planned on. Especially then. What would you have done if someone you'd lived with for nearly a year appeared in your doorway just before 1 in the morning and said the one thing that changed the shape of everything? And have you ever been carrying something for so long, calling it by the wrong name, until the person across from you finally said the true version out loud? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.